Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. If you've never popped into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and I'm not quite sure if I'm ready, but sometimes you look at that clock and you look at the laptop and you just have to say, hit that live button, Cindy. Get in there. And I never fail myself, and that's the truth. Even if I do truly fail, it's in that attempt that I even tried, right? That I even just showed up. Even in the last minute, even being the last person to finish that line, I made that effort. And if it's not perfect, well, maybe the effort in the perfection is not there. And I never admitted to myself or to anybody else that I was that perfectionist. I would say quite possibly not the opposite of that, but somebody who is not too concerned about the mess, right? It's not so concerned about the surroundings, right? It's the essence of it. It's the feeling, it's the decor, it's the company we keep, it's the color and the brightness and the lightness, right? It's the sense of comfort that it gives us. We can show up in that. It's easy to show up in that in a way that we can feel like we're ourselves. And, even if we are failing, right? Even if we're not getting it right or doing it by the book, that the effort has got to be appreciated, right? Even in our limitations, we can show up a little bit, right? I'm really big on baby steps. If you've been with me for any length of time, I have done this myself in baby steps. And because I've done it in baby steps, I have been able to course correct in some of my misunderstandings, one of which I'm in this week, like a big one, not something really small. When I first woke up to some of these ideas, I woke up into the lessons of narcissism. I woke up to recognizing some of those aspects of my own dynamic family and its impact in my own life and recognize those traits and mislabeled it. And that's the truth. I got stuck in narcissism, but narcissism, the topic, came across my path for a reason. Just because I attached that label to something that it wasn't in my own mistakes. And sometimes maybe that's the test. Maybe it's the understanding of how, how far into the lessons are we going to go? Are we going to stop when we get that answer? Or are we going to delve into that answer and truly make sure that that answer is the right answer, right? That perspective that we put that effort into understanding truly is an understanding, right? Meaning that it's the truth. And a part of being genuine and showing up here, right, is to admit when you've made a mistake. And I labeled my mother a narcissist only because of the scariness and the brutality and the coerciveness in some of the lessons that I received and in some of those aspects that made her cold, right? And I did mislabel it. And a lot of these aspects of narcissism are recognizable in other personality traits also, namely borderline. I've been in the topic of borderline now. Well, it's been coming across my path probably for a couple of months, but actually delving into the topic no longer than a couple of weeks. And it is a really wiry kind of topic when you line it up against narcissism, because some of those aspects of narcissism and borderline are very, very close in what they come to the table with. And you go into the topic of narcissism a little bit deeper. And if I had stopped at narcissism and just left that label on my mother, I would have been doing myself a disservice, and I would have been doing my sisters a disservice, and I would be doing our bloodline moving forward a serious disservice, because we'd have this verbal history of narcissism in our family, and it's there, right? It's definitely, I come from a dynamic family, and each one of us is different. But like I said, some of those traits are very similar in the topics of borderlines and narcissism, even empaths, even myself, as an empath. I grew up in these dynamic families, and of course, in being a adapt and conquer, in um, um, reaching for rope and strings just to hold myself afloat, grabbing at anything to get myself out of a sticky situation, right? I would have paid attention to the way my family members, right, coped with those scary situations, or those difficult situations, or in those failures in their own life. And I would look to see who was getting it right, who was moving in a way that was less painful, right? And I would do that for myself. So I would pick up these traits. Just because somebody's a borderline, it doesn't mean that they don't have narcissistic traits. They do. I just said that there's a lot of commonalities in it. But when I was talking about the intent, right? That intent, sometimes it's just in the relief that we want to release this pain that we have in ourselves, right? And when we can see something that's different, that shows themselves maybe a little bit better, that doesn't seem to have those difficulties that you might have. Sometimes we do get jealous. Sometimes there is some resentment there, right? And yeah, that pinch, that bite, right? That little jab in the side that we often get when somebody wants to bring us down to their level or remind us of our place in life, right? And it's not a reminder of the place in our lives. It truly isn't, because we get to choose that. And in baby steps, you might not be there right now. You might not even be there in the next 5 years. You might not even be there in this lifetime, but it is, right? In making that movement, that we're able to pick up this information and we're able to course correct, right? And I can understand that some of those traits that I may have picked up were maybe borderline traits, right? And borderlines have a sense of control about themselves too. That doesn't mean that they're narcissists, right? And we got to be really, really careful about that labeling. Like I said, I've never been a big fan of the labeling, but sometimes, in not knowing where to start, having a little bit of a label kind of gives you a direction, doesn't it? Kind of gives you a side branch to say, hey, go down and check out these topics and see how well they sit in that situation that we're in. Okay, you guys, let's pick a card. Just a couple of minutes in a perspective. I had an amazing day. I spent the day with my sisters. I haven't seen them since Christmas. I had to return a camp stove I got for Christmas because it was missing some of the accessories, and I got a new camp stove, so I'm really happy about that. Filled up some groceries into the cupboard so I can just flake out and do nothing on my days off, except maybe a little bit of laundry and take in some lessons and come into my brand here and share whatever adventure, conversation, or content that I have come across. Really funny right? I go into headline news to see what's going on in the world because I have been a little bit spaced out and drawn away through some of the topics of right what's going on in the world that I'm kind of right at least make sure that I'm on top of the headlines. And today nothing about the fires or anything like that. And we're right into Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And it's really, really funny how we are jumping topics so fast as we're shedding one topic, we are jumping in to another one. And again, like I said, it's in that vying for our attention, right? Everybody vying attention. And it's just as what's your poison? What's your desire, right? What are you looking for? And right, there's someone or something out there to fill that void in you. And right, I don't mind that I'm not distracted by the news. I've got things that I can do, right? And it's not like I have a big list or anything, but in what I do, I put that time in, right? That time for myself and that time for the job that puts the roof over my head, in those relationships that are important to me, and the lessons in my movement, right? And all of that happens because I make those choices and I make that intent to move, right? And it might not be perfect. It might be full of kinks and mishaps and disasters, but it's still movement, isn't it? It really is. We learn from our we learn from our mistakes, and everybody should be allowed to make those mistakes, right? And we all wonder why some people get the message a little bit easier, right? That are able to digest it a little bit easier. It's probably because they've had those same lessons over and over and over and over again, right? That eventually they got something right. And each one of us gets that to make that choice for themselves too, right? It's just a matter of what's your poison, and let's get going. Okay, you guys, just a couple of minutes. We're pulling the word thoughtfulness. Well, first thing that comes to my mind today is my sister was not feeling very good. She bought me a camp stove for my trips. You guys know I love camping and spending time in provincial parks, and she bought me a camp stove for Christmas, but it was missing the parts in it, right? But she wasn't feeling very good, and her car was frozen. We had a big blizzard. We went freezing, like -40 Celsius with the wind chill, maybe closer to -50 with the wind chill from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Super, super cold. And her car battery froze, and she had to get one of those towing companies to come in and give her a boost and get it all started. And then she had to get some blood work done and groceries. And it was a busy day, only for a few hours, right? But it filled up her day lots. It's like I said, and sometimes it's in that capacity. Each one of us are in a different stage, and we have different capacities to hold the problems, and we have different lessons, right, on our tool belt as to how to solve those problems. And so, to each one of us, right, we have to decide kind of effort do we want to make. And my sister, she thought it was important to get that barbecue turned in, right? That that receipt, Christmas receipt, is not going to be valid forever. So let's get that done. She got a little bit of fresh air. She got to spend some time with her sisters, right? And it all came from that thoughtfulness of putting her own needs off to the side a little bit, right? Right? She could have said, Cindy, I'm not feeling good. And I would have said, not a problem. Stay at home. Right? I'm bagged from my work week. I could sure use a day to flake off. But the same thing, that's the thing. I would have flaked out on that, and there wouldn't have been any fresh air. There wouldn't have been any movement. There might have been some lessons because I love to sit in this chair. right? And see what's going on in my world, right? And those topics that are important in my movement forward, right? Not necessarily headline news. And I'm going to try really hard not to beat myself up. And I'm going to try hard not to Google the headline news because obviously nothing's going on in this moment that affects me personally, right? And, in that movement, it's called movement forward for a reason. It's because, right, no matter what, we just keep going. We can scoop up along the sides as we're moving forward, but we don't stop in that, right? And when those disasters and failures happen in our lives, to just understand if we just get up, brush ourselves off, appreciate the effort that we made. At least we tried. There are lots of people, we know it, that are not even trying, right? Give yourself a little bit pat on the shoulder and say, okay, you're going to do better next time. Or that was better this time. Holy moly, getting better. Okay, so you got to do it again. Not a big deal. But this part, well, I think you got this part down pat, right? And it's in that repetitiveness that we get that perfection in, right? And that only comes from those choices. But when we talk about the thoughtfulness, that was the first thing that came into my mind is, you know, those small kindnesses when we understand that somebody put themselves out a little bit further than what they had to, that they stepped out of their, well, maybe their comforts, right? Maybe in their own securities, because lots of times, like for me, right, going to even do a return on an item from a store is not the most thrilling thing for me. It's probably a very difficult thing. My sister went in there and I just carried the barbecue and I just stood behind her and she did the whole thing. And I just like, man, that would be stressful for me. That's just not something that I do, right? But that's in my own programming that's like that. But that was really, again, thoughtful. And this was a different sister. And I forgot that, right? But yeah, she came in there and she did that for me. And the day just went bang, 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 bang. And the next thing you know, I'm at home. I'm doing a little bit of tidying. I'm taking in some lessons. I'm washing dishes. I'm in contemplation. And I look at the clock and I go, oh, Cindy, you're going to do a live now. And so, oh, I would sure would love a bath. I didn't say no to myself. I ran myself a bath. I got myself in my pajamas. And here I am. Oh, the word you can't even see, thoughtfulness. Now, if you give me 1 second, we'll see, because I didn't write that one down. And maybe that's something that I can do tomorrow is just to carry on with those words. Okay, thoughtfulness, number 21. Oh, it was so simple. It was just like 3 words, right? Thoughtfulness is remembered. How perfect is that? And that's the truth. The kindness that comes along, it's remembered. You might never ever cross that person's path ever again, but that person is going home and they may mention it to their kids, the kindness, or their spouse, that kindness. Maybe that spouse is yelling at them when all cranky when they get home from work and she's at the kitchen sink and she's washing dishes and she's remembering a kindness that you did for them. And, in a moment when they could say, this is the worst day ever. Oh my goodness, come home to this and then listen to my husband, right? After I've had a bad day, but because you slipped in, that you came across their path. And even if it's just opening the door for them or giving them a seat on the bus or sitting at the bus stop and it's a stranger and you pick up in a conversation and possibly shared an insight with each other, right? right? It doesn't necessarily that insight has to come from you. Maybe they gave you that insight. They gave you that gift, and they're going home and they're feeling good because they were able to give today, right? And sometimes, right, it is in that thoughtfulness. That was a really good one. Thoughtfulness is remembered. It truly is. Every kind deed, right? And there wasn't a lot of them moving in my life, but the ones that were magnificent and beautiful and remembered. Okay, you guys, that's my good chair. I'll be back tomorrow. Have a good night.